Keep in touch with the Wolf Connection Podcast on our Instagram handle at the Wolf Connection Pod, or email us your questions, comments, and guest ideas to podcast@wolfconnection.org. Thank you for your support, and howls to you all. Welcome to the Wolf Connection Podcast. I'm your host, John Kalfa. So our thanks to Cassie Camara, who has been able to put us in touch with some incredible folks in the international community with wolves. And this is our first Swedish guest. He joins us from Västerås in Sweden. He's the head of field work for the county board in Sweden for the last decade or so, and really excited to get a perspective on wolves over there in Sweden. His name is Daniel Mallwitz. Daniel, it's wonderful to meet you. Good afternoon, as we were saying, with this 9-hour time difference. How are you doing?
Very well, thank you.
Yeah, it's, again, really like to extend the thanks for you being available, and obviously that we were able to make this work with the time difference and things of that sort. Just give everybody an idea, because you were really describing where you work and how this all goes over there. Where did you, just give us your background. Where did you grow up? When did large carnivores or wolves or anything in particular like that start to come into focus for you to be a career and go down this life path that you're on right now?
Yeah, so I grew up in Sweden, in the western part, close to the Norwegian border. Could be described a little bit like remote. Looks a bit like the landscape is similar to Minnesota, northern Minnesota in type. Grew up in a small village, about 300 people, and animals are around. Fishing is a part of life, things that you do. We had a small farm with horses, chickens, dogs, cats, and things like that. So animals were kind of like they were always there. This is also the area where wolves recolonized Sweden in the 80s. They were actually eradicated in Sweden, same as in many countries. So I grew up actually always living in a wolf territory or close to one, not really reflecting over it, but saw a wolf as a kid and things like that. So I think it was always kind of fascinating, wild animals. Don't know why I thought wolves were fascinating, but I guess everyone does to some extent. And then after high school, bounced around a little bit in the world and then settled to study biology, basically. And George's story is, it just kind of happened. I liked wildlife management when I studied, and I liked large carnivores, and then it kind of happened. I did my master's at Scandinavian Wolf Project, and it just rolled on from there, basically.
Describe the landscape for everybody who is listening to this. Could you say sort of like northern Minnesota? What does your day-to-day look like? What are the the tasks that you're looking for? How do you, now are you in charge of, because I was reading your bio that you sent over, and thank you for that information. You're saying that you're covering a lot of the large carnivores there. So not just wolves, but lynx, wolverine, and bear. So are you specifically, or your department, in charge of tracking, covering all of these large carnivores?
Yeah. So the county board in Sweden is equivalent to maybe the DNR and the Fish and Wildlife Service, something like that. And we do basically the regional large carnivore work. So Sweden has 21 different counties, and every county has a county board. It's not like a state, but let's say something like that.
Okay.
And we, one of our tasks is monitoring large carnivores. And when I say large carnivores, it's like you said, wolves, lynx, wolverine, and bears. In my area, it's mostly lynx and wolves. For the sake of this, we're just going to focus on wolves. So we have to every year monitor them, and I think we're going to talk a little bit more about that later. When there is livestock depredations or they kill dogs, hunting dogs, it's our task to deal with that, pay subsidies for that, investigate if it actually is wolf that's done the attacks. We also have, so you can get subsidies for a lot of things in Sweden, like wolf deterring fence for sheep farmers, for example, protective vests for hunting dogs. So we deal with that as well. We inspect the fencing, so it's good to go, so they can get money for it. We also help farmers out, like if you want to build a fence, you don't really know how to do it, you can call us. We come out and help you out, make a plan, and we don't charge for that. It's just a service that the government has. If there is a problem animal, we need to have a protective hunt. We decide about that as well. If an animal is to be removed, if it's been killing a lot of sheep or something like that. Also, if we're going to have a quote unquote normal wolf hunt, it's our job to decide on that, on the quota, and also to monitor it. And we don't do the actual hunting, but we do basically everything else.
What size fencing are we talking about here? Are we talking about miles of fencing or small properties?
I mean, pretty small. We don't have like ranches like you guys have in areas. We have smaller pens, basically. I would say the average sheep farmer is not a full-time farmer. They have maybe 20 animals, just for fun. There are a few guys that have like hundreds of them, but the average fence that we put out, or that applies for money from us, they have a smaller amount of sheep.
And you call them protective hunts?
Exactly. Yeah. So you would call it like depredation or something like that. Yeah. So it's basically, it's depredation.
Just describe kind of the logistics of that. What warrants a protective wolf hunt, and how do you identify individuals and make sure you're lethally addressing the right animal, or just what does that look like? How many people go out on those hunts? All those things.
Oh, it can be vary a lot. So let's say we have a wolf that is. So we had an example a few years ago, a wolf that she started to hunt for cats inside a village. So every night she would walk into the village and take cats. It's a niche. Yeah. It wasn't really strange. It was a young female. She probably realized that she couldn't kill like big prey herself. Realized that if you go into the village during the night, there will be hundreds of cats walking around. So it was just a wolf doing a wolf thing, but it wasn't really popular. So we decided to take her out. And that would be one problem, that they're searching for food close to people. Another thing would be, they keep on killing livestock, things like that. Normally, someone applies and gets a permit. And you said, do they go out several people? It's kind of up to them. They could do it on their own. They can go out 100 guys, or in Sweden, it's very common that you use a dog to hunt wolves. So probably they will do that.
Give everybody a general idea of how are wolves situated, and sort of the population statistics, I guess, as you can do it, as close as you can do it, that's up to date, about the amount of wolves that are, I guess, in your county. I don't know if you know the country statistics, but like what are the types of sizes you're looking at in terms of population, pack dynamics, and things of that sort? And just let's start there and see like what you're dealing with on your end.
Yeah, you asked me a little bit before, and I had to look into like how can we compare this to you guys. So I actually looked at the size of Yellowstone, and the area that I work in is, I think I said half the size of Yellowstone, and we have 8 wolf packs, or we had 8 wolf packs last monitoring season. I think it looks like we have indications on our camera network that we have more this year. We think we might have 2 more, so that would be 10 packs. Some of them we share with neighboring counties, of course, but we have 8 to 10 packs in a size that is half the size of Yellowstone. So it's pretty dense. we don't have these big packs that you guys see. Usually a wolf pack in Sweden is the male and the female and the pups of the year. Maybe one or two pups that, stayed on from last year, but you don't get these 20 wolves together and, different constructions. It's family groups, basically. That's all we have.
And are they moving throughout, because you were saying about this one problem wolf that was killing cats in this town or village? Are they more habituated to human presence? Are they moving into towns or villages and things like that on a regular basis? Is there space for them to hunt larger prey? And what kind of larger prey are they looking to hunt if they're not going into villages? And, like you said, this niche wolf was hunting cats and things of that sort.
Yeah, that's actually, that's a one-off for us. So I could use it as an example. The average wolf pack here would their main diet is moose. There's a lot of moose in Sweden, even though it's been depleted quite a lot. So it's the population size has gone down. We also have wild boar that they eat. A few packs eat a lot of wild boar, and a few packs eat less. We also have red deer, roe deer. So, there are a few things, but the main prey is usually moose calves and younger moose.
What's going on with the moose population as far as the reduction in population? Is it predation or weather or?
Oh man, you could do a podcast about that if you want. So there has been an active choice to push the population down. Sweden probably still has the highest moose density of moose in the world. It's really dense compared to, for example, North America. But then the wolf comes back, and I think the average wolf territory takes about 100 moose a year. So, that will have an effect in just my area. If they only eat moose, they will take 800 moose a year. That's a lot of animals. So that has an effect. Weather. There is a lot of studies, I think, especially from the US, that when it gets warmer, that will affect the moose. You also have a change in the dynamic of other animal species, like we have wild boar has showed up, fallow deer is showing up, red deer is showing up. So they also have some kind of effect on the moose. There's a lot of research going on with that. So there are several factors, and the presence of wolf eating moose is one. But yeah, you could probably invite someone else here and have a 2-hour podcast about that.
So with a majority of their diet made up of moose, which I assume requires, I imagine, a handful of wolves to successfully hunt consistently. So how do you find that individual wolves, separate from their pack, adapt to prey base in Sweden when they're on their own versus with a pack? Do they tend to transition to alternative prey like this solo female we were talking about with the domestic cats, or what's their tendency in the area?
They probably do like a North American wolf. When they're alone, they will change and start eating. There's a ton of beavers here that they like to eat. So you have a lot of beavers.
That makes sense.
We joke about it sometimes and say if there's water, there's a beaver. So you have the small roe deer they can eat. So
okay.
There will be prey for them, so they can change that. I think the most dangerous part of being a lone wolf in my area would be that someone else kills you when you're walking through the area.
Right.
So.
Okay. Is there any physical difference? I know when we were in the wolves that are in Sweden as opposed to North America, I know when we spoke with a couple of researchers in Spain and we were talking about Iberian wolves, there was a different look. They seem to be slightly smaller, maybe by 10 or 15 pounds. Are the wolves in Sweden descendant of those, original gray wolves, or are they smaller in size? What's a good barometer if you were to compare it, to the North American wolves?
I would say they're probably pretty similar to the North American, considering that they're on the same altitude basically as Alaska. And our wolf population comes from the Russian-Finnish population. So it's we don't have black wolves like you guys, but otherwise they look pretty much the same, I would say.
Got it. And when you're for your job and for tracking and monitoring, what are the ways? Because you talk about your trail camera system, what are the ways that you're able to keep tabs on either individual wolves, individual packs, because the pack dynamic is incredibly small? Is it easier for you to gain a lot more research and have sort of a track to be able to keep tabs on what's happening, the reproductive rate, disease, whatever you guys may be looking to do, because those packs are so much smaller, and looking at 3 to 4 wolves as opposed to 10 and up when we look at Yellowstone, just as an example?
Okay, you can get a really long answer now,
That's fine.
ending with a rant if you want to.
Sure, go for it.
So first of all, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that Sweden has the world's greatest wolf monitoring system.
Awesome.
No one has a better one. And the thing is, we don't count every individual wolf. We actually look at the territories and the status inside the territories. And why I'm saying it's so great is it's standardized all over the country. And it also is standardized in the same way in Norway, which we share a population with. And so what we do is, our main method is snow tracking, but we also use trail cameras, but not to a large extent. And what every county board has to do is every year look into how many wolf packs do you have? What's the status? Is it a breeding pair? Is it a breeding pair with pups? Is there pups of the year in that group? We have to decide that. We have to identify the male and female by DNA, so we have their identity. And we do this every year. And the pedigree for the Scandinavian wolf population goes back to the founders. You can actually see a full pedigree of all the animals that has consisted in this. So every wolf that we take a DNA sample of has an individual ID.
Wow.
And we do this, and it's not unique for us. So the neighboring county does it the same way, same method. And we've done it for many, many years. So it's like super detailed, but we don't count them. So we don't know, we don't really care if there's, we want to know if there's pups there, but we don't care if there's 1 or 10. Even though there is a lot of focus on the numbers, like how many wolves are there? And I claim actually that the important number is not the number of wolves. And here is where the rant could come. It's actually how many territories you have that is relevant, basically for everything.
Yeah,
go for it. You want me to rant about it?
Yep.
Yeah, please.
Go for it. Okay, the example is this, basically. Let's say you have 100 wolves. People are like, we can only have 100 wolves. That's all we can have. What does that tell you? Nothing really. It could mean, and I'm going to be extreme here to make my case, it could mean that you have 50 territories with a breeding pair in each one of them. That's 50 territories. Or it could mean that you have 10 territories with 10 wolves in them. There's still 100 wolves. However, a wolf pack will predate about the same as a breeding pair on moose. So they will both take 100 moose, 120 moose. The 10 wolves will probably consume more of every killed moose, but otherwise it will be about the same. So, and if you have like 50 territories or 10, well, they will spread over the landscape more. So you'll have a distribution that is 5 times higher. You'll have a predation that is 5 times higher, but both of them have 100 wolves. It's an extreme example, but it's like the number isn't that important when you have this kind of systems inside the wolf packs. So, but you know, politicians love it. They want to focus on the numbers. Media want to know how many wolves do you have. And when you say we don't count them, we count the number of packs, and they're like, what? But to the moose management, that's what's important. How high is the predation pressure? And you can tell that in the best way by telling them how many territories there are.
So what's the science behind the wolf and moose cull happening sort of simultaneously, meaning wanting to lower moose numbers, but also culling the numbers of predators that are consuming them?
So we don't do it at the same time. The moose hunt starts actually tomorrow. And we actually, just like 3 hours ago, we released the decision to have a wolf hunt in Sweden in January. So brand new information for you guys. There will be a wolf culling in Sweden in January again. No, so the moose hunt is done in the fall, basically, most of it, and the wolf hunt is in January. But the reason for a wolf hunt in Sweden has not really anything to do with depredation. It has something. It's something else. It's you focus the hunt on the areas where it's the highest density of territories in order to lower the density. So what we actually try to do is to take out the whole pack, which is tricky, but it's easy on paper.
And what's the reasoning to lower the density? Is it because of, and this may be more of an American term that gets thrown around, is it because of the social carrying capacity for everyone in Sweden? As in, like you were stating before, right, about the numbers, and the numbers are always the thing people go to, is we'll accept 100 wolves, not 150 wolves. So we need to have a wolf hunt or a wolf cull to get to 100 wolves. Describe that.
It has a little bit. So you're focused on the density because that's like the political decision that you should aim the hunt towards the areas where it's the highest density of packs. And it also has something to do with maybe social carrying capacity is a good word, or acceptance or tolerance or something like that, that you focus on these areas that have had wolves for a long time and maybe have high densities of packs. So that's where you aim to have the hunts, basically.
Is there, I want to say acceptance may be the wrong word, but is there a tolerance level that is built into the culture of Sweden of wolves? Because you said they started to repopulate in the 80s, correct? I want to get that right. So they start to repopulate. So how is this, from your perspective, from your expertise, how has the country in the last 40 some odd years built up, I guess, this tolerance or this social carrying capacity for when wolves began to repopulate and come back to get to this point where they're okay with them to some degree on the landscape, just in certain numbers?
That is a tough question, because I'm not sure that you will, I should have put this. Yeah, to some extent, it might be an acceptance by a lot of people that, okay, the wolf is going to be here, and they're maybe not, I don't like it, but I'm going to accept it. There is still areas where there is a lot of poaching of wolves in Sweden. There are areas where they have a high turnover rate of wolves, and so that would probably vary how high the acceptance is and tolerance of wolves. And also, if the area is very remote, maybe it's easier to go to poaching, and it is probably local culture and things like that. But it is, it's not that easy, I think, to describe that, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's a little touchy. Yeah,
is there a general fear of wolves harming people in Sweden outside of the ranching community? I mean, just non-ranching citizens, just people living in a town somewhere.
Oh, for sure. There's probably people that are terrified of going outside because of, they're afraid of wolves. But we have the same, that a lot of people are terrified to go outside because of the wild boar, because they're scary. So of course there's going to be, but I think the average person, they don't fear for their life. if they don't like wolves, it's probably because they fear of their pets or they fear of their livestock. Sweden also have a strong hunting tradition. It's a very big thing in Sweden. And moose hunting is, if as close as you get to a religion, it's like a big deal, the moose hunt. So when it's gone down and the quotas are going down, it's people get upset. And Sweden also have a really strong tradition of hunting with a loose baying dog. Basically, you release a dog that, finds a moose, barks, and it's a whole thing. And all of that, if you like moose hunting and you like hunting with a dog, there's no reason for you to want to have wolves on your hunting ground. They're going to eat moose that you cannot shoot. And if they meet your dog, there's a risk that they're going to kill it. So it's a tricky situation sometimes to get that.
How do you balance these relationships? Because I know that's one thing that Cassie wrote in her introductory email about you, is that you're able to balance these relationships between these different groups of people, whether I don't know if it's governmental, it's with the ranching sheep community, and then also I would imagine there is some form of wildlife advocacy groups or people who are interested in the science of wolves or large carnivores. How is that for you to balance all of those relationships to try and get your work done in a way that is informational for everyone involved, so that they get the right information about what's happening with wolves in your county anyway?
That's a good question. I think one thing I try to do is to be pretty straight on and don't do any bullshit. Like, it's better that I tell you the harsh truth than that I try to sugarcoat things. It's like I said, I can acknowledge, you like moose hunting. You have a moose hunting dog. A lot of people think that I'm there to change their mind, to get them to like wolves, and I don't need to do that. I understand if you don't like wolves, and it's fine. But now we're in a situation where we have wolves. They're going to be here, and we need to find a way to deal with that. And most people that I meet, at least, they like that approach, that they might not like the wolves, they don't like the situation, but at least, I'm not telling them that you should like this or you should just accept it. It's fine. So, and I usually also say, if I don't have the answer for them, I will say, I actually don't know. I'll try to find out for you, but I don't know. So straight on and try to just be like, and sometimes you get a call, someone is upset, I want to shoot that wolf because of this and this. And instead of sugarcoating it, you can just say, well, I hear you and I understand that you're upset, but actually you don't have enough on this to legally push it through. So I get you're upset, but it's not going to work.
How do you feel about predators being a want or a need in Sweden? For example, does Sweden need wolves? Does the ecosystem need predators? Or does Sweden want predators? Or why even bother? If ranchers don't want them, hunters don't want them, people are worried about their dogs, why bother with conserving or maintaining predators?
That's a good question. Now we're pretty oriented on the problem with them. So I could also say that we have at least 3 companies in my area that's operating like wolf howling tours and things like that. So, we should, and there are a lot of people that are out like in the summertime listening on wolf howls, and we get a lot of calls on that. Where should I go to hear them and things like that? So of course there are people that like them as well and enjoy them. But if we talk from like a more ecology perspective, maybe, do we need them? Sweden is a highly managed country. We managed everything. If you go to Sweden, the forestry is like, it's been managed for hundreds of years. It's like clearly managed. It's like a cornfield, basically, a lot of it. The wildlife population is also managed. If we want less moose, we can decide to manage it so we get less. Technically, if we want more, we could probably manage it so we would get more. And that's the same thing with everything. So in order to keep like, well, I'm of the opinion that there will never be a balance in nature because it's not how it works. But you don't need the wolves, I think, to balance something, because we manage everything pretty hard. We manage the bear population, we manage the lynx population, we manage the wolves, the moose, the red deer, everything, and we keep track of them. So it's not a landscape that is unmanaged. So it would be strange if you wouldn't manage the carnivores.
As a manager and as the head of field work, do you, because you did bring up this interesting thought about this interesting way of describing how this environment is, like you said, managed to a high degree. Do you feel that I'm trying to put this the right way. Do you feel you're losing anything naturally because it's so highly managed, as opposed to managing less and letting nature take its own course? I don't know if I'm putting that correctly. I don't know if you understand what I'm trying to say. Do you feel that information or anything that you would be gathering on a regular basis as a manager is being lost by the fact that Sweden has been doing this for so long, managing every single species, that it's, I guess, not a naturally occurring ecosystem? I mean, please just correct me if I'm wrong. I'm trying to, you understand kind of where I'm going with this?
Yeah, I understand what you're asking. And then I could be the devil's advocate and say, sure, what is natural? So technically we are part of the natural world. It's getting very philosophical now, guys. But okay. I don't think we lose anything. It's just a different world. I mean, the wolves obviously like it, the lynx as well. They are highly adapted to living in this. There is a lot of prey, maybe to some extent because we manage the landscape in the way we do. So, I mean, we're able to have this big moose population because there was food for them in the way we were running our forestry. There is a lot of wild boar because of, we allow it to be. We feed them. Hunters subsidize them, especially during the wintertime. The same with the red deer and the roe deer. So yeah, you might lose something in the landscape in the way it develops and how the forest looks like. But in the same way, humans contribute in some way to a lot of species, and that also makes maybe the wolves lose something, but they also gain something. So it's really hard to tell. And they're so flexible, all of these large carnivores. So they just deal with the cards they're dealt. It's amazing, right? Kind of like, okay, this landscape, it's a lot of farmland and it's a lot of wild boar. Oh, okay, let's live here. It's going to be fun. Or they're like in Yellowstone. Oh, there's bison. Let's go for bison. It's muskox in Greenland. Yeah, that's going to work. It's going to be on the tundra.
Wow.
So it's not an issue for them.
Right.
They're having a good life, I think, in this landscape. It's cool for them.
I like the philosophical aspect of wildlife conversation. I think it's cool. We've kind of covered almost everything else, so it's nice to hear some philosophical thoughts about it. And so so sort of an extension of my question, which is, okay, so a lot of these major groups don't want wolves on the landscape, and what you're saying is they have a utility, but it's not something that humans couldn't sort of manage regardless. So in your mind, why even put in the effort? Why bother to manage populations? I mean, it's an interesting question.
It is an interesting question, but in that sense, it's a lot of animals and fish and birds that you kind of could remove. In that sense, it's like, oh, this fish doesn't taste well. I'm gonna Why do we need it?
100%. Yeah.
So
why?
And also, like you said, that we focused a lot on like, which you tend to do when you talk about large carnivores. Like they're an issue, they're a problem, they're a cost. Yeah, but you should also know that, for example, wolf hunting. There are specialized wolf hunters in Sweden that they like this. They have specially trained dogs. They have a lot of equipment, and it's like a big thing for them. So for them, it's turned into a resource, basically. You have these tourist companies that do the tours and they do tracking sessions. So then it's an income. And then you have people that just like being in the forest, knowing that there is a lynx out there or there is a wolf pack somewhere here. They might not even see them. And if that's a value, you can't really put a price on it, but I mean, it's still there. So, and honestly, you kind of, not every hunter hates wolves, and not every hunter wants to eradicate them. It might be that they don't want them too many, or they don't want them, I just want to release my dog, but as long as my dog is fine, I don't bother. So there is, you probably don't hear that much from those guys. They're not that loud. They just like, they don't engage really in the meeting. They just like,
yeah, they get
that
on
makes
with
sense.
it.
Yeah.
For you, Daniel, because I want to go more, I guess, for your personal, is there, because you've been there for, I think anytime anyone's been in a position for as long as you've been there, because a decade's a long time, is there an experience or was there a moment that has stuck out in your mind when you've been doing your job, whether it's, did you ever have any experience with wolves up close, or you were tracking, or you were getting, you're recovering scat? I saw in your presentation that you sent, anything that stood out for you, even if there's a couple of stories, we'd love to hear anything from your personal perspective that's sort of stuck in your mind about why this job is, it's become this career for you. What's something that stuck in your brain in the time that you've been here?
That's a really good question. Basically, you're asking why I do what I do.
Yeah. Or if there's any specific point that any story that you have that's stuck in your mind, that's.
I don't have a good answer, actually. Honestly, the reason why I do what I do is that I like to build this puzzle every year. So every year we need to conduct this wolf monitoring and lynx monitoring. And right now, it's from the 1st of October. Right now, we know nothing, basically. And then we have to build this data set of like, who are the parents? Where are the territories? How are they spread? And it surprises every year. And you get to do these long, detailed tracking sessions that we do, like several kilometers, collecting DNA, and then you send it to the lab, and you get small pieces of the puzzle. It's really fun. I really enjoy it. And like you said, you asked about a specific story. I don't really have one. It's every year you will end up doing something that is like, oh, that was cool, or that was strange. I've been out tracking on a lake, and then, you're on the way back and the wolves have walked around you and they were closer than you thought. Do you meet them out on the ice in your own track and they're meeting up with you? And you're like, oh, shit. But their reaction is basically the same, and they scatter all over the place. So, things like that. When you go home, you're like, cool, I saw a wolf. So, and maybe you do. Once a year, maybe I see a wolf, something like that.
So you're able to, so they're, wow, that's pretty cool. The fact that you're able to see them, at least see them every year. And and obviously the difference, or some of the difference that people here in North America, when you go to a place like Yellowstone, for the most part, you need scopes to see wolves, and we're talking hundreds of yards away. So people, and sometimes they come across the road, but that's a rare occurrence. Whereas it seems you're able to get these close encounters without, and just doing your job, just managing and track,
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm just saying.
But
Go ahead.
This is my job.
Right.
I do it full time,
Right.
and I do a lot of tracking, and I see maybe one wolf a year. So if you want to see wolf, because this is, like I said, this is like northern Minnesota. It's pretty flat. It's like forest everywhere. So you basically have to walk up on them or they run across the road. So if you want to see wolves, your bet is probably in a scope in Yellowstone. It might be a few hours that you have to be in the forest here to be able to see them. Because, yeah. I can tell you those stories because they're unique. It happens so seldom that I remember them. But yeah, it's very good if your listeners have the thought that I see a lot of wolves. Yeah, once a year is probably a lot. So
it is. I mean, there are many folks that we've spoken to that have gone even to Yellowstone, for instance, years, year on end. For the most part, at some point they'll see them, but there are people that maybe go 4 or 5 times and they maybe see a wolf once. And so you're talking about years maybe in between trips. Whereas people would, I would think, there are some folks out there that would love to have just the one encounter that you have every year, even if it's just one, that resonates more with people. It just sort of depends what resonates with different individuals, right? I mean, for you, doing your job allows you the space and time to where these things happen, and they are unique and they are different, I think, from many folks that would see them just on the plane, in Yellowstone or in Grand Teton or anywhere else. You're seeing them in, like you said, your home country, doing the work that you're doing for this amount of time, which is pretty unique and special in some way.
Exactly. And I can actually say many years ago, I was out and had my current girlfriend with me. And we came out on a forest road, and I saw some scat on the road. And I said, when we get to the end of the road, I'm going to try to howl and see if we can get an answer, because I think they're here somewhere. They had pups and everything. And so I went out of the car and howled, and instantly the pups answered, and then they stopped. And I was like, yeah, we get some kind of answer at least. But then suddenly she said, oh, there's something moving. And so I howled again. And then 4 pups came out on the road and started walking towards us. Like these, this was in July, so they're pretty small. And she was like, oh my God, there's a wolf. And I was like, yeah, that's pretty cool. And then I howled again and they started coming closer. Then we could hear a bark and they just skipped into the forest. And it was getting pretty dark, and you could kind of hear that there was something moving around us in the forest. And I think she got a little bit uncomfortable. I think she sat into the car. And I was like, yeah, they're here. The parents probably barked at them. And it was turned quiet. And then I was like, maybe I could get them out again. You have good confidence when this happens. So I howled once more, and then the whole pack answered, the adults on the other side of us. So they have walked around us. That was the sound we heard, in the forest. So we could hear the whole pack howling. So I howled with the pack for a while. This is a one-time experience. This was just pure luck. It just happened. So I was howling with a wolf pack, and then I realized, because I had been doing my job for a while and I had been howling with wolves, and not like this with the pups and everything and so close, but I actually realized that I was excited, but not super excited. And that's a problem when you do things like that. You kind of lose the edge a little bit every time. So it's like last winter I saw one wolf out on an ice. And it was like, it's far off. It's just, I saw a wolf today. And I didn't even tell anyone, because it was just like, it was far off, just on the ice. It was just a blip like that. And I can kind of realize that sometimes when you do a job like that, and it's probably every cool job, if I can say my job is cool, that you lose a little bit track of it. That it's like, I'm getting paid to follow wolves all day, to track them and to follow lynx and do camera work. And it's It's fun, but sometimes you get a little bit synthesized and you just. I can sometimes think that, like you said, people, they go every year to see them, and I was like, I'm not super excited. It's too far off. So that was a long story, but yeah, there's your story.
It's a great story.
It was about something else.
It's a great story.
Well, you definitely have a cool job. Any interesting wolf research coming across your desk per se that researchers are working on in Sweden at the moment? New methods or interesting theories that you're aware of that are being investigated? Or
I mean, the thing is with Sweden and Scandinavia is that they have one research group, basically, the Scandinavian Wolf Project. So you should get someone on from that. So it's like you can kind of condense the whole thing. If you wanted to talk about moose wolf research, they have done a lot of it. So you should talk to them. But right now, the latest thing that was pretty interesting that I saw was they did a diet analysis. So we collected a lot of data, cats for DNA, but there is no reason for research not to use our data. So we share it with them. It's fine. They can we just need the DNA. If you want to do a scat analysis, just do it. So they did a pretty interesting, I think it was stable isotopes, and looked at different packs, what they were eating. And that was pretty interesting data, that it was pretty varied, even though we think that they probably eat a lot of moose and it's a high amount of meat. Stable isotope analysis doesn't really tell you how much they're eating, just that they have been eating it. But it was cool, and it was a big variation between the packs in Sweden. So I cannot really recap the whole study because I just, briefly read it. But it was interesting that even though the Swedish wolf population isn't super spread out, it has a lot of variation in its diet, actually, depending on what's available in the landscape.
And how is that information? So you say there's a lot of sharing, obviously, of information going around in the Scandinavian countries. Is that something where you'll, at the end of every, I guess, I don't know what what your year is like, whenever you're done with all your tracking and monitoring for the year, is that something that you share with surrounding countries, surrounding counties? What's is all the information just sort of shuffled around so that everyone's kept in the loop of what's going on with different packs that obviously share borders? Oh
yeah, so so every county is responsible for their area to collect the data, and then it's we have a coordinator, a national wolf coordinator, basically, for the monitoring, and we put everything into standardized database that we all share, and she puts it together to the Scandinavian monitoring of wolves, and it's the same for lynx and wolverine. So that is basically management. So the researchers don't do the monitoring in Sweden. It's the managers. It's professional trackers, basically. But then we have a close connection because Sweden isn't that big of a country. The researchers know the managers and vice versa. So every year there is a small conference that the Scandinavian Wolf Project has, and a lot of managers, we go there and they show their latest research, and it's a good time to exchange ideas. What does the management need? What kind of questions do we have? They show us the latest research they've done, and it's a quite close connection because probably the country is pretty small.
For you, what makes you a good tracker or monitor of wolves? What are the things that you use to do the things that you do so well?
Well, you're assuming that I'm good at my job. That's pretty nice of you. I like it. What makes me a good tracker? Well, it was actually a guy in Minnesota that I was over in Minnesota many years ago learning how to trap wolves at a research project up in Voyagers in Minnesota. And there was a guy that told me that trapping is humbling. When you think you got it, it stops working. And it's kind of a little bit the same with tracking. It's like you have to be humble that you actually don't really know what's going on. You're just getting a snap picture in what the wolves are doing for a short period of time, and it's long as you're humble about it and willing to learn more and accept that you actually know very little about it, I think it's going to be fine regarding the tracking. So I'm very aware of, and that's the problem. I mean, I was probably more. If you would have asked me 2 years into the job, I would probably be, yeah, I got this. It's fine. I know everything. You know, the tracking is this and this, and you do that and that. But the longer I work and the more I learn, I realize that I know very little. So yeah, and if you can accept that, it's going to be fine, probably.
So, of course, this could be an entire podcast itself, but if we can just touch on it real quick, I think that would be interesting. So we talked about how wolves affected prey species in Sweden. How did the reintroduction of wolves affect the other major predators that were still on the landscape?
So honestly, all of the 4 large carnivores that we have were having a really rough time for a while. I mean, bears were almost extinct in Sweden. I mean, it was small, scarce population up in the north. Same thing with the wolverines that were only found high up in the mountains. It was like considered being an alpine animal, basically. Lynx was also scattered around the landscape. Wolves were totally eradicated. So, and I think it was like in the 1920s, they were decided like there was no bounties on them, basically. But when they came back to the area where I grew up, which had at that point, an huge moose population, like an insane one. And they wandered in from 3 animals from Russia. So, and there you have a conspiracy theory as well, you know, that they were placed there, but most likely they walked into one of the most densest places in the world and settled down. And then there have been a few others coming in. It's not the greatest genetic diversity, but yeah.
So it all just sort of collectively happened at once, it seems, and everything just sort of went from there. Those 3, and then we kicked off this whole, you know, wolves coming back, and the population started to rise to a degree, essentially.
Yeah, but I mean, if you look at it in that perspective, the Swedish wolf population has gone up. I mean, it's around. We weren't going to talk about individuals, but about 400 individuals, I think they estimated to, something around there. And I mean, it could have been way higher. I mean, we have been hunting for 5 or 6 years. In some areas, there have been poaching and things like that. So if you would just let it go, it would probably go pretty quickly high up. But like I said, it's a managed population. And
so there's a wolf hunt annually. It happens.
So it's based on the monitoring from the previous year. So if there is, so depending on the monitoring, if you're available, there is like space for that, because Sweden has like a commitment towards the European Union that we shouldn't go under 300 individuals. So it's depending on, you know, the space between how much we have and, you know, down to 300, basically. Very simplified version of what's going on, but yeah.
And so the poaching is, so is poaching considered a big problem, or what do you credit the poaching incidents to if there's a legal way to hunt wolves most years?
Well, I think if you are a guy that goes, and now I'm speculating, but if you are willing to poach wolves, I don't think that you want to have 0 wolves. You don't want to have less wolves. So it's probably just a bonus that they're taking out 5 territories somewhere else. But that's not what I want. I want 0 wolves. So maybe you can like get other hunters to kind of not accept the work that you're doing. If there is no legal hunt, maybe it's like, well, there's no other option, so let that guy do what he's doing. But if there is a legal hunt and you want to hunt wolves and some other guy is poaching them, it might not be a good idea. But that's more of a speculation.
If you were to, I guess, look into the future here, and everything seems to be rising and falling fairly regularly in terms of how, whether there's a wolf hunt, whether there's not, population sizes seem to be relative. As you said, they're going up, but things seem to be regulated fairly well. If someone was to ask you future of wolves in Sweden in particular, what would be your general assessment as you've been doing this for as long as you have? Will they continue to go up? Will it pretty much stay the same? What's the track that you've seen in the last decade or so, being in the position you're in?
Honestly, the population will probably be decided on a political level, not like a natural level. We have a system where we monitor them on a high detail level. We know a lot about them. We do it every year, and then so we will really quickly catch on if something is going on. And if you have a political climate where they decide we want to have 600 wolves, we will just, don't do any hunting or anything, and let them go to 600, and then we'll, keep it there. So we have a system in place where we kind of can do it like this. We can keep them on track because we have this pretty expensive but highly detailed monitoring system. We have a tradition in Sweden of managing wildlife, and there is a lot of knowledge on how to hunt wolves in Sweden. So I think that the Swedish wolf population will be whatever the current politics decide it to be.
Right. I mean, in terms of that, the political system that generates these kinds of wildlife decisions, just talk about how that kind of works. What parties what parties it has to go through to come to a decision. How is a decision made about wildlife like this?
So regarding wolves, it's actually regionalized. So they want the decisions regarding like wolf hunting to be on a regional level. So we can make our own decision if we want to have a wolf hunt. But on the other hand, we have a responsibility as a country towards the European Union to keep as many wolves as we promised. So it's still a quota on a national basis. And then we have to get together all the counties and decide, okay, we have this many, we want to hunt 1 pack, but we have this many, so we want to take 2 packs. And then we have to sort it out like that. So, but the actual hunt and things like that, there's no politic in that. The actual politic is
I love it.
More in, population goals like that.
Daniel, for anybody who's listening, what's the best source of information? Where can anybody who's listening to this and they want to learn more about the work that you're doing, wolves in Sweden, what are the best resources for them to look into?
Oh, I'm assuming that this person speaks Swedish. I don't think there's a lot of information in English. I would go for actually the Scandinavian Wolf Project, because they also on their webpage have basically all their published articles and everything. And that would be my way to go into the Scandinavian wolf population.
Okay. So we'll definitely have that in there in our description, so anybody who's listening can find that website there. My last question for you is, when you hear the word wolf, what is the thing that comes up for you?
Work.
That's a first, I think. Yeah, that makes sense. Daniel, this has really been truly informative, and we really appreciate your candor and going into all these, answering all these questions and giving everybody a perspective that I think not many people are able to have about wolves in your country, and understanding everything or mostly what's going on there with wolves in Sweden. So we really appreciate your time and being able to answer all this stuff and give us a larger perspective about wolves over in Sweden.
You're welcome. And yeah, I hope I answered more questions than I created.
The whole point, I mean, listen, if you created more questions, that just means we have more podcast material to do with you, so we'll have to do it again if possible.
Yeah, we'll do an on-site version when you get to the Netherlands for the Wolves Across Borders then.
Ooh, see, there we go. I'm going to have to go to the Netherlands, folks. Daniel Mallwitz, thank you so much for, again, all the work that you're continuing to do and everything you've done up until this point. Really appreciate you and everything you're up to.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Yes. Hang tight while we sign off. How's to y'all out there? We'll be with you next time. Bye, everybody. Looking for more information about Wolf Connection or the podcast? Please visit our website at wolfconnection.org, where you can donate, sponsor a wolf, or become a volunteer.